Hello, everyone. My name is Randy Richardson. For those who don't know, I am the president of the Chicago Writers Association, which is hosting today's special event, Cocktails and Conversation with Garvin and Jacquelyn Mitchard.
Without the cocktails.
Without the cocktails yet. We're offering this presentation via Zoom as a bridge until we finally are able to return to in-person events, and as a thank you to those who have stuck with us through the 2 postponements of Let's Just Write, an Uncommon Writers Conference. Whether you are a registered attendee, a volunteer, or a scholarship recipient, this special event is our gift to you to show our appreciation for your support. It promises to be a lot of fun. My co-host is Samantha Hoffman. You want to wave for everybody, Samantha? The director of Let's Just Write. Trying to direct a writers' conference during a pandemic is not an easy thing to do. Samantha has shed more than a few tears through the 2 postponements and deserves a lot of credit for never giving up on it. We're still very much committed to one day having that in-person conference, but for now we're offering this virtual sample via Zoom. For me, I don't know about you, but growing up, Zoom was what I watched on PBS after school. Now we're doing everything via Zoom. CWA was actually using Zoom for our board meetings long before most people ever even heard of it, long before this pandemic. But doing events via Zoom is still new to us. There's a learning curve, and so we ask for your patience and cooperation. And so now I will hand off the virtual mic to Samantha, who will give you a few courtesy reminders for Zoom participation, and then introduce you to our special guests for this afternoon's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Thanks so much for attending, you guys. This is really special to me because I love these 2 ladies, and they have been so kind and generous to us as an association and for the conference. I think many of you, I know all your faces, not all, but most, and many of you have been to previous conferences. We've had 2 so far. So I know you know Garvin, and Ann is coming back for the next one as soon as we can make that happen. And Jacquelyn Mitchard is someone who I've known about for, shall I say, 30 years, 40 years, whatever. Whenever you released your first book. You're on mute, Jackie, sorry. But anyway, I read that book, The Deep End of the Ocean, and I saw when Oprah picked it as her very first book club selection. And so Jackie is like this icon to me. And then when I reached out to her, and I reached out to her through Ann, because Ann and Jackie have been friends for a long time. And when I reached out to Jackie, she was so kind and so generous and offered to do so much for the conference. So I'm so pleased to have her with us. So I'm gonna do a little bio here, and then we will get started with the conversation, which, yes, Randy.
You want to let them know that they can chat if they have questions?
I will.
Okay.
So what's going to happen is Ann and Jackie are going to chat for 40 minutes, more or less. And if you have any questions, there's a chat button at the bottom of your screen, and just write out your questions. I'll be looking at them as we go along, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of their conversation. So as I said, many of you already know Ann. So, and she's a wonderful speaker. She is a PhD and the USA Today bestselling author of I Like You Just Fine When You're Not Around. She writes the best titles. I love her titles. She wrote The Dog Year and On Maggie's Watch. She teaches writing at the University of Wisconsin Continuing Education and Drexel University Master's of Fine Arts program. And she's held positions at Miami University and Southern New Hampshire. in their Masters of Fine Arts program. She's the founder of the Tall Poppy Writers. And if you don't know that organization, Google them. It's a wonderful organization. And it's committed to helping women writers succeed. She's a sought after speaker, especially by me, on writing, leadership, and health. And she's taught extensively in New York, San Francisco, LA, Boston, and at festivals across the country. Her new book, I Thought You Said This Would Work, another great title, is available for pre-order now. And I think it's, don't remember the publication date, but it's very soon. And then what you forgot to write on this bio that you sent me is your new book.
Oh, yeah.
Which will be published in October 2022. Is that right?
I think so.
So anyway, I can't wait for that one. I've pre-ordered this one. So very happy to have Anne here. And thank you. Jackie is the author of 21 books. That's prolific, of fiction and nonfiction for adults, young adults and children, with more than 3 million copies in print worldwide. So she's just kind of a writer. Her books have been printed in 31 languages. They include The Deep End of the Ocean, the first selection of the Oprah Book Club, and a #1 New York Times bestseller, and it was also adapted as a movie. No Time to Wave Goodbye is another of her books, which is now in development by Kaleidoscope Entertainment for an HBO series, which is fantastic. Mitchard's novels have won or been shortlisted for the Orange Prize for Fiction, the Bram Stoker Award, the Shirley Jackson Award, the Heartland Prize for Fiction, and the UK's Talk About Prize. And they include 5 New York Times bestsellers. Her next novel, she also has a new book deal, and that novel called My Only will also be out that one will be out in October 2021. Is that right? Okay. Yes. From Mira HarperCollins. Jackie's a professor of fiction and nonfiction in the MFA program in creative writing at Miami University of Ohio and Western New England University. She served on the fiction jury for the National Book Awards and has been a fellow of the Ragdale Foundation, Yaddo, the MacDowell Colony, and Hedgebrook. And I am honored to present these 2 wonderful people to you, and it's going to be so much fun. So take it away, ladies.
Wow. I mean, my God. I feel like we used up a lot of time on that bio.
All that palaver.
Just think if she would have read all the titles of your book there, Jack.
Just think if I never would have answered your email.
So we have to tell everybody why
origin story. This is our origin story.
I think we have to tell everybody why we're friends and how it happened, because one of the things that we want to talk about is how important it is to have writing friends. And so for us to brag about having each other as friends might sound a little bit like, oh, lucky you. But the truth of it is that we were just trying to figure out how many years it had been. And I think it was in 2000, maybe 6 or 7 so it was back in the day when you couldn't just email everyone, or it was really far enough back that you could email them, but I didn't know your email. And I wrote to the Milwaukee Journal because she used to have a column there, and I read it all the time and I loved it so much. I just think she is like a genius essayist. And so I read this one and I wrote to her and I was like, God, I just love your essays. And they just speak to me, and I live not that far from you, and I'm not a crazy person, and I would love to get coffee, and here's something I wrote, and like, would you like to be friends? Like, I was ridiculous. And she wrote back and was like, okay. And we were talking about it because it was like me writing Julia Roberts in my mind. And, so when she said, it was like, God.
7 miles apart, portal to portal.
Mm-hmm.
Now we live, oh my gosh, 1,200 miles apart. we're still as close as ever, but that is
Well-
onerous. We should have seen each other every day when we
Yeah.
had the chance.
Yeah, we should have. So what I guess my point in saying that was that, Jackie was the lady, is the lady for me. And so when she said yes, I couldn't believe it. And one of the things that we want to encourage you to do is to reach out to people, because you might find, like Jackie and I, we work together, we talk a lot, we help each other write each other's books, not actually write them, but talk about how to plot them. And without other writers, at the beginning I didn't have anyone, and it's only helped me to have other writers. And so we want to encourage you to reach out to people and see if you can find writers. I'm sure, Greg, you found that same thing, that once you get a little bit of a tribe, you have people that can actually give you feedback on your books in a way that your mom can't, your friends can't.
Even your like writing group can't.
Yeah, right.
Because you can judge from people and be bold about who you reach out to. You would be surprised how many people. I was just telling before we started doing this, I was telling people, almost everybody has a telephone or an email address. And I've been shocked my whole life by how many people, if you call those person on the phone or email that person, will answer you themselves. They will answer you themselves. And they're more than usually people who have done something that they're happy with or proud of are more than willing to answer questions about it. The myth of writers being haughty, which you all know because you're part of a thriving writers group, is just that. It's a myth. Most writers, I can name a few, but most writers are nice people and you could name the same person, right? The same people. That most writers are not haughty. Most writers are giving. Before her death, it would be a real trick if I could do this after her death. But before her death, I became friends with Mary Higgins Clark just by writing her an email. And within weeks, it was Jack. She was calling me Jack. I was calling her Mare. She was just as giving and dear as you could possibly imagine, and wanted to encourage you. Or I wrote to her to ask her a question about suspense, about how to engender suspense in a book in every page. And she gave me this wonderful, short, but very incisive answer. And this woman at this point was like 89 years old and still in there. I just noticed that I brought her up because I just noticed she has a new book out, though she is quite dead.
Well, and I was going to say too that I think one of the keys to what we're saying here is a couple of things. One is that I really wanted to meet Jackie and I wanted to ask her questions about stuff. I didn't think we'd be friends. I didn't ask her really to be a friend. I was kind of joking. And I didn't ask her for anything. I didn't ask her to read my work. I didn't ask her to introduce me to her agent. I didn't ask her to try to get me published. Like, I really only had this very lovely idea of Jackie and who she might be, and maybe she'd have coffee and I could touch her robe. It wasn't, what can this lady get for me? And when I do get those kinds of emails, I do get those kinds of emails that feel like an ask that I can't do anything about because I know it's just really an ask. Those turn me off, right? But when it's someone just genuinely nice person sort of saying, I'd love to do this. I may not be able to do it, but there is a way of asking that isn't an ask. It's just
and you can be sure
kindness.
That if you're talented and you reach out to a writer who's well published for whatever reason, and that writer is impressed with your work, that writer will try to help you. In a general way, I think writers want other writers to succeed.
Mhm.
not succeed more than me. Ann and I have talked about this. You know, we want to succeed a little, but not more than us. But 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 if someone
not-
writes to me and says, here's my novel, can you please send this to your agent? That would be presumptuous anyway. That's like saying, here's my picture, would you please marry me?
Yeah, it would be. So we're not advocating that, but I always say, take your meds and then write your email and then just hope for nothing, really, expect nothing. And if you get something else, that's awesome. But, I think that that's kind of the way it works. And then one of the nice things for Jackie and I is that we found that we were able to, it's really interesting and what we can do. Like, Jackie will text me out of the blue and
in the middle of the night.
in the middle of the night, or like she gets up at the crack of dawn, and I do too, but she gets up earlier than me. And inevitably my phone will bing. It's Jackie, and she's like, so would she kill him if she had the chance, or would she wait to kill him? And how would the best way to be to kill him? Because she can't do it with that knife. And I'll be like,
yeah, I will say, Ann, do you know how hard it is to stab someone? Because Ann, is a professor of physiology, and it's
frequently
really difficult. And so what would she do? Would she knock him out first? And how is she going to knock him out? Or how would someone explain to you how their process questions? And Ann will write to me and say, okay, I have them here in Seattle and they're leaving the airport. All I have to do is get them to Ohio in 2 days. What should happen along the way?
Yeah.
And because books, people are always saying, people are always fibbing about the fact that books come to them fully formed in the universe. And they say, and all I did was take dictation from the universe. This is a person who didn't take their medi. And they're saying all these things, but really openings of books come to you that way.
Right. First lines maybe
come to you that way.
Yeah.
And then you write the beginning and it's like a house on fire. And then you come to the rest of the story. And this is the story of why books never get finished. Why completion is such an issue. It's because you can't cross that desert alone, or I can't.
Yeah.
And if you find someone who you not just trust, but admire, if you admire that person's judgment, and you can ask that person something that you may not incorporate every bit of advice that they give you, but though I will say I've incorporated 80% of the advice that Ann has given to me about plots and characters, 80-90% maybe, because I trust her judgment so well. And we write entirely different kinds of things. She writes upmarket, funny, sometimes even fizzy women's fiction, and I write things that are dark and sad and ripping out every emotion that you have and crying about it. And but I trust her judgment enough about what I do, and she does the same thing, that we can give each other those stepping stones. And finding someone like that that you can reach out to in your life, I think is of extraordinary value. It literally takes months.
Yeah, and we speak the same language, and we both have different skills. And so, like, when she's asking me a question, I know what she's asking for. And that's really useful because and she doesn't compete with me and I don't compete with her, which is another big thing. And I only really want to work with people who are willing to make those changes. Like if Jackie argued with me the whole time, I'd just listen to her and we'd probably go off our other way, but she doesn't. She's like, okay, yes, okay. And then she'll go away for a little bit. She'll be like, I gotta take the kid to the dentist, I'll be back. And then she'll ask me another question or I'll ask her a question and we come back to it. And it's hard to find somebody like that. It takes a while. You have to break up with a lot of writers to get there.
And we broke up once too.
You know what? I would suggest too that it's just occurring to me that I think one of the reasons that it works for us is that we do write such different things. Because if you were a funny author or funny in a different way than I am funny, I think you might be like, that's not funny. And because it's not your kind of funny. And so I think well, you know what I'm saying? I'm not saying you,
I know
but
what you're saying, but I don't know if you're right. I mean, I understand you because you're speaking English.
But well, I do think there's different kinds of funny, and so I think that that's one of the things that helps us is that, you know, we write, except for Jackie's exceedingly funny, which I always say I wish people would understand how funny she is, and I always want her to write a funny book, and then she writes some horrific book that, like in like children get in danger and there's death and destruction. I'm like, but you're so funny. She's like, oh, I can't.
I think that it's that having someone to talk to whom you can trust and trust that person's judgment is invaluable. We think of writing as a lonely process, and all of you are part of a terrific organization. So you're trying to militate to some degree against that loneliness, but also it is in the nature of being a writer to be a recluse, to be sequestered to a certain degree, because you have to be sequestered in order to do this. You have to be able to recuse yourself from the world. And so to have someone who you can trust inside that sequestration, inside that tower in which you enclose yourself, is enormously important. I take great comfort, not just in, I mean, we aren't just writer friends. I mean, we do a lot of stuff that I will not explain about because someone was probably on the wrong side of the law in our lives. Mostly you, yes. But me too. Do lots of stuff, lots of mayhem, lots of things that are silly and enjoyable. But the bedrock of that relationship is mutual trust and forgiveness. Because if you have someone who is going to share opinions about your work and your life, sometimes it's going to bring you up short, and you're going to have to be able to understand and forgive. Don't you think?
I definitely think so. Jackie and I, somebody has asked about our breakup, and we did have a little breakup. And one of the things that I think that was nice about our breakup was that we were able to come back together and figure out, you know, how our friendship could keep moving forward. And what it really did for us is create a general honesty between us in a conversation that I think is one of the reasons that we can talk about our books so easily. I think you know, when you really learn to tell another person the truth, and not just have a superficial friendship or whatever, then when she talks to me about a book that isn't working, I can go, Jack, this isn't working. And she, you know, if she got defensive, I'd be like, you know, I'm not competing with you. I'm just telling you what I think. And then she'll be like, you're right. Or the same thing. She'll be like, Anne, that's you. Why are you doing that? You should do something else. And then you're muted. Why? Unmute yourself. Are you muted? Why are you muted? What? What's happening?
This is a message from the universe that I should keep my mouth shut.
No. But it helped us tell the truth in lots of different ways.
Yeah, and if I have given much advice, of course, I'm a professor of writing, so I give, you know, people advice all the time, and you can tell. And don't you think this is true, you guys, all you guys? The more, I don't think that you need to be a sponge or a snail, you know, just lying supine, waiting for people to walk over you. But those people who are most defensive about saying, oh, I can't change this. My favorite, one of my favorite rationales for not saying, oh, but that's the way it happened in real life, so I can't change that.
Right.
Because, that's when my parents met on the boat coming over from Ireland or whatever it is that is the person least likely to be published.
It's true.
If you're defensive about your work, and then you're not going to make it through the soul leveling rigor of having a major publisher edit an editor edit your work who doesn't care about you and isn't your best friend, and because that can be, when you get that manuscript back and every page is covered with revisions, and some of the revisions are like, why don't you just take out chapter 17 entirely? It doesn't work. You have to lie in your bed and like cover up to here and just cry until you're able to get up and be in denial. They don't understand me. They don't understand art even. And then you get up and do what needs to be done, because the editor wants you to succeed as much as you want yourself to.
Well,
sorry.
Samantha.
Don't you think that when you get that kind of feedback from an editor, your immediate reaction is, what the hell do you know? That's the story. That's how the story has to go. But if you sit back and think about it and then go back and read it, you see what they're talking about.
Yeah,
Indeed, because the editor is the stand-in for your reader.
Right.
The editor is the person who is standing in front of all those many thousands, one hopes, many thousands of people who will read your book and saying, this may be what you meant, but this is what's on the page.
Yeah.
This is what I'm seeing. And this is what it means to me. And you have to find a way between those things.
Right.
I should say that Samantha edits a lot of my stuff. Whenever she does, because I can't, I can't punctuate anything, and I can't tell when I'm like missing something or took a leap too fast. And usually for my blog, like she edits all the essays that I write for my newsletter. And
I think they were better than they.
What?
I thought they'd classed up a lot.
Well, that's why she changed she puts punctuation in. And but yeah, I mean, we're sort of getting into the idea of revision here, and I think that for a new writer or someone that hasn't published yet, that question is always, when is it, giving up your art, and when is it making things clearer? And, I mean, I think that you have to understand what you do well and what you don't do well. And I think that you have to be open to all kinds of observations about your work. But usually I don't take too much advice from people who aren't writers. But I will say that when a writer I respect gives me some feedback, I listen to it. You know what else I do? And I don't know if I ever told you this, Jackie. I read my reviews that are of 3 stars, because those 3 stars, they get it right. Often those are the ones
that do.
Yeah,
I didn't used to read my bad reviews.
I
will. Instructive.
The 3 stars seems to, like, sometimes I'll read a 3-star and I'll think, well, yeah, they're kind of right about that. Like I'm sorry that they gave me a lot fewer stars for that reason, but I sort of I think they get it right, but it's too late for me to change it by them. But I don't know.
But it's not too late for next time.
It's not too late for next time.
And you would think, even though I really haven't, the deep end of the ocean was 22 years ago, not 40 years ago. Good God. I think I would have been in college. Anyway, even back all these books ago, I thought, I guess, after a certain point, what do I have to learn? I was arrogant enough, I think, to think that. And then in recent years, especially since working with a new agent and and especially since working with a new agent, I have learned how much I had to learn and how much better my previous books could have been
Mhm.
if I had paid more attention to some of the things that I didn't know. I didn't know.
Mhm. That is the truth. I have had in this the book that's coming out. I thought you said this would work. The book that's coming out next April. That I had an amazing editor for that, and by far it's going to be my best book. And here's the thing, that this editor was a really good, because she would do this. She would say, "Anne, right here is missing what you do best." So right here, yeah. And then she wasn't ever changing anything substantial, except she'd go, "Right here is what we need, is a little Anne Garvin, and you missed it." And we went through 2 or 3 edits. The story didn't change at all. It just got more layered and deeper, because she'd be like, "But what is she thinking right here?" And she kept saying, the term that she keeps using is "let us in," which I then made her a coffee mug that said "let us in" on it and mailed it to her, because I was so sick of her by then. But also, but every time she wrote it, now when I'm writing, I think she's going to ask me, "Let us in right here." So I'm just going to do it, so I don't have to listen to her tell me to let her in.
That's the same thing Jeff does, but he uses different language. He'll say, "What's happening in the kitchen right now? What's happening that is among people right now?" And he'll also say to me, "I know you think that that's what you're saying, but it's not what you're saying. I know you think that you're trying to convey this, but you're not." And
It's harsh.
it's harsh.
He's harsh. I've worked with him too.
He's dog. Yeah, he's harsh.
He tries not to be, but he is.
Well, I don't think he can stop himself.
No, I know.
He's so impatient.
Yeah.
He has really good taste.
He does.
And he gets really impatient. And Karen Dion will say the same thing, he just takes no prisoners. Now I'm used to it, and I know that he means it. And when you get it right, you feel like you've pleased the cruel ballet instructor.
Yeah.
And you've finally been able to do the right thing. And I just wish that I had not gotten away with the things that I had gotten away with for so long. I say that with humility. I wish I had not been able to call my own shots for as long as I did, because I was almost there, but not. Shouldn't we let folks ask?
Yeah,
Yeah,
questions.
I'm not seeing, I'm only seeing one question in the chat that we didn't answer, and that was, who was it? Susan wanted to know what Mary Higgins Clark, what her advice was about mystery. You had said you asked her questions about mystery.
I did. She said, and this is, people say that you have to have rising suspense throughout. If you're writing something that is a thriller or a psychological thriller, you have to have a rising suspense throughout the book. But she said you have to have rising suspense on every page. And that was a tall order. And she said that it didn't have to be so overt that it was, but he wondered what the knife would be used for next. But you had to have every page had to embody a question that would take the reader into the next page. That's what she said, which I think is great.
It is. And that goes for books that aren't suspenseful. It goes with any kind of writing at all. You have to have questions that are going to move the reader forward. It's a little different in suspense novels, but in everything we write, we want the reader to wonder what's going to happen next.
Aren't you surprised by so many books that start out? When I edit books, and I edit, I'm an editor, private editor, along with being a whatever else I do. And when I get books, well, look at you with that cocktail. It looks like a hot air balloon. It, that when you get a manuscript from people, you know, the person is a perfectly good writer. And I look at it and they have a perfectly good idea. And then the whole story just lies there like a lox, saying, you know, well, this guy was very sensitive and then he got more sensitive. And then he met a girl and they were both sensitive. And then they broke up and they felt bad. But there are no peaks and valleys. And, you know, one thing that Anne quotes me on, so I guess I should ask her to quote me rather than quote myself, is that there have to be a certain number of events, big events in any story.
11.
11, and that's how many there are in almost every story. So that a major, a minor event leads to a major complication, which leads to a minor complication, which leads to a major complication. And it keeps going on and advancing that story or even memoir until the moment of grace or recognition is achieved. And then the denouement and the ending starts. But this is just what you were saying, Samantha, in I would not say the Bible or the Lord of the Rings, but in most stories comprised by 300 or 350 pages, there are about that many major events.
Where does the number
Analyze.
11 come from?
I don't know. That's what I did an analysis. And it was 100 years ago. I sort of saw it. And if you apply this, if you take a story, take a book you love and sort of take it apart, you know, the guy leaves home, you know, he gets a job and then he meets this girl and then they break up and then he meets another girl. You'll find that that's probably true for most stories. It somehow seems that the books that are most crowded and unpalatable because they're crowded have more than the right number of events.
Yeah.
It's about what a narrative can contain. I don't know why.
Here's a question. Arlene wants to know, how important is title and how much control do you have with your book titles?
Oh, geez, I have a lot to say about that.
Me too. You start.
In the beginning, I didn't have any control of my titles. In fact, the first two books, they changed the titles. And I didn't have any input on it at all. And I was so grateful that they were going to publish my book. And this is something that Jackie always says to me, Anne, she's always saying, please be pleased, not eager. And I can only ever manage eager. I think the definition of me is eager. So when they were like, the first book was supposed to be called A Congregation of Crocodiles, because the idea is that you didn't know who the crocodile was in the town. And they were like, we're going to call it On Maggie's Watch. And I was like, ugh. But I couldn't do anything about it. And then the second one was a story of addiction. And I wanted to use the old adage, let go, let God, but there was a dog involved in her recovery. And so I wanted to call it Let Go, Let Dog. And they were like, but this is the funny thing. They were like, that's cute, but let's let go, let God. And I was like, it's the alcoholic's tenant. And she goes, not that many people are going to know what that is. And I was like, I live in Wisconsin. There isn't a soul that doesn't know what that is. I'm like, we are alcoholics from word one. But I was like, so surprised. And I said, well, I think they will know. And she was like, yeah, we're changing it to the dog year. And I must have sent them 8. Jackie was part of it, because I was like, Jackie, we need more titles because I don't like the dog year. And she and I together sent them like 700 titles, and they were like, the dog year.
Absolutely obdurate.
So then after those two, I only have a few books to talk about. Jackie could probably tell you 21 stories about her books. But then I Like You Just Fine When You're Not Around. I published with a very small publisher, and they were like, we're not changing that title. That's fantastic. And that title is really, the good thing about titles, in fact, what I felt like my titles do is they're like the first line of a book. They are an entree. They're supposed to be a clarion call into your book. They're supposed to be like an entree that adds a piece of information before you get into the book. The best titles kind of do that. And I like to just find when you're not around was good because it talked about the title. People understood that belief behind that. They understood that it was going to be funny. And then I thought you said this would work. It's the same kind of a title. And so and the next one is Falling in Love is the easy part. So they're leaving me alone now, which I'm very grateful for, because really my titles are my tone and my book 100%. They really speak about me. And so when they changed it, I felt like it was like clear they didn't trust me, which, I was new. So I'm very grateful that I have somebody who trusts me with my titles now. Jackie. And that I didn't have any control. And even now, like if they said I didn't like that title, I don't know what I would do. I think I might be mad about it.
Well, I think titles are of extraordinary importance. Extraordinary importance. It's
They
like,
are.
do you want to name your kid boy?
Yeah,
or girl,
right. Yeah.
or a one or two. They're the name of the thing. They're not the thing itself, but they're the name of the thing. And my titles are very different from Anne's titles. I think of them as like, they have a lot of gravitas. No one has ever changed a title on a book that I have written, because I think in part because I sweat blood over those titles. I go to poetry, I go to Shakespeare, I go to the Bible, Emily Dickinson, and who's the Irish guy that I like so much?
The
And
poet?
yeah, Yates.
The
William
guy,
Butler Yeats.
Angela's Ashes guy or Billy
No,
Cobham?
William Butler Yeats.
Oh, never mind.
I search everywhere for my title, and I try until I know it's the exact right thing. And then I think of it as like, you wouldn't call Leviticus anything else. You wouldn't call Genesis anything else. And people say, and I get a kick out of this, one of my students calls me the titleist, like the golf ball.
Yeah.
Because my titles generally are, even, dare I say, they're better than the book. So they promise much.
Oh, that's funny.
Not the publishers, don't they want titles that say who this author is? Like, Anne, your books, except for the dog years, your titles are very indicative of you and your story. And Jackie, yours are indicative of you. I mean, they say something about what story you're going to read. And to a publisher, they want that cohesive, right? They want
that makes sense, particularly now in this era of branding. And we all hear about this, that you're a kind of fruit, or a kind of like frozen meal deal, or something that has certain components. And you should hear, like, my pal Karen Slaughter is the great mystery writer, and other, I mean, certainly mystery writers have known about this for thousands of years. Like Mary Higgins Clark, every book that she wrote was the name of a popular song. Okay, that was her brand. And then there was one for the money and two for the people have cottoned to this a long time ago, because you want to endear the reader not just to this book, but to the book to come.
Yeah.
That you walk into a store, and the minute you see the voice of that title,
Mm-hmm.
you know that you're safe. Okay, you've gotten an Anne Garvin book, you're safe. You can go to that checkout counter.
Yeah.
So Debbie would like you to comment on outlining versus writing, just writing.
I outline everything.
You do?
You know, yeah, I
Everything.
do.
I don't do it in the way that you did it when you were outlining your term paper, but I write what's called a narrative outline, so that in a general way, I know that there's going to be 18 chapters, and because that's a lucky number for me for some reason. And in 1, this is going to happen. And then in 2, she's going to get to the part where she goes to the restaurant. And then in 3, we're going to find out why she never got to the place where she was going to study. And 4, we're going to find out what the secret was involving her mother. And a whole bunch of other stuff will happen, but there are hallmarks and signposts so that by the end, I know what the end of my book is going to be. And to almost an eerie degree, I know almost what the last sentence will be. And the whole rest of the book, I can't write. If I start with the first sentence, I can't write any more of the book until after the first sentence is perfect. Has to be
Oh, no.
perfect.
Don't you love the little idiosyncrasies? Like, it's so
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah. And then the whole rest of the book is writing to that last sentence.
Uh-huh.
And how about you, Anne? Do you?
Well, so I do something. So my last 2 books were sold on that outline. So, and so the way that I do it is, it's interesting because I do it the same way I teach people to write their books, is that I write a log line, and then I write what would be considered the back copy of your book. And then from there, I take very classic story structure and I write, like paragraphs of that. So the insight, like backstory and a hook of some of the more important characters and where they come and who they are and why we care. And then maybe the next title will be inciting incident. And I'll be like, well, this is where the story goes. So it's not necessarily going to show up on the page that way, because the inciting incident, mostly we would like to have that happening up front. But they will then know, my editors will know, oh, okay, this is all substantiated by backstory and empathy. So then the inciting incident happens, then I'll create a pinch point and I'll write a paragraph about that for each of the characters. And then maybe I write a midpoint reversal. So I use it in this very classic story structure in a paragraph way of what's going to happen. I never did that before. I wrote my first 3 books without that. And that's just a miracle that I did it that way, because my next books, then I wrote 2 books that ended up in a drawer. And I thought, that's enough of that, like writing books that go into a drawer. I couldn't do that anymore. So I had to figure out a better way of doing it so that I didn't lose so many years and time. And I figured out that this was a really good bird's eye view of my novel. Then I could sell it this way, and then I could write it. And
That's a key. That's a big key, because for new writers or writers who are just having their first publication, one of the reasons that books don't get finished is because they are inadequately planned.
mm-hmm.
And I don't say you have to do what Anne does or what I do necessarily, but when I hear people say, I just sit down and wait for the characters to take me and they're going to show me what to do. First of all, I think 2 things, and one of them is not.
One of them you can't say.
Nope. Yeah. But the other one is, this is not going to be published, because if I did that with my characters, they would just crack open the Doritos and sit there on the couch forever and ever. They would not get up and do anything or take care of any business. And they would continue to have sensitive insights.
Well, and what, like, why eschew classic story structure? We know from every good movie you've ever watched that they've embraced classic story structure. So why would we ever want to say, I'm going to do it this way and it'll take care of itself, when we fully understand and know how people like to hear a story and how it goes forward? So I have often taken
people think it's freeing and more creative to eschew classic structures. They think that there's going to be something new under the sun, even though there hasn't been since people got up in a cave and said, okay, he was sensitive. He met a girl, she wasn't as sensitive. And they put that on the walls. And then they went out and got a bison. That the story has always been the same. Something happens, and people are not just going to read a story for insights. They want to have something happen.
Yeah, and I mean, go read Visit from the Goon Squad and
Yeah.
the reviews of that book. Well, I mean, sure, whatever. It was, you know, it was avant-garde. It's a literary book, but you read the reviews of that and people are like, I want to die. And
Right.
because it's hard to read, because it's not really a novel in any sense of the word. It's
No,
many things.
It's an idea of what a novel is like. But then you read CWA Girl. Then you read Never Let Me Go, which is a completely
Yes.
traditional novel structure, a science fiction novel by a maestro,
Mhm.
and a book that won the Nobel Prize,
Mhm.
and you can actually read and enjoy.
Yeah.
See, there are two things. I don't want to just admire a book. I
Uh-uh.
want to have a good time. Life's short.
Yeah.
So Maria,
Yeah.
Maria wants to know about flushing out your characters. So if you're doing a narrative outline, do you also flush out your characters?
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. You have to figure out what your character wants. I mean, and I'll say that again. I know everybody that's ever heard me say it is probably rolling their eyes right now, because I'm telling you right now, the whole book is driven by what that character wants, because whatever they really want, you know, they will move in that direction, and that's action. And you as the author just takes it away. And
Everybody in a book has a desire and everybody has a secret.
everybody. So, and if they didn't, it would be your neighbor and it would be really dull watching, right?
Right.
So, and just because it happened in the real world doesn't make it a story. So yeah,
Oh God, please. Yeah. Just because it was the love story of these two people that you really like and everything doesn't mean that you can start out with the impression of any lyric passage in real life, but then you have to, you know, the statue is in the stone, like Michelangelo said. You know, you have to twist that and turn it and chip for it and change it. And you can't just rely on the inciting or the what do I want to say? You can't on the original inspiration to carry you through the whole orchestra that a novel is. I mean, a novel isn't just a folk song. It's an orchestral piece where the original theme is stated and then it's restated in many different kinds of ways and then wrapped up again with the original main title.
Yeah.
We're coming to the end of our time, and I just want to thank you guys so much for doing this. And I want to address a comment in here. Rose says she feels stymied by COVID and she needs words of encouragement about keeping on the writing path. And I have to tell you, Rose, me too. So, you know, that's what this is all about. It's about encouraging each other. And look at this community we have. It's amazing. And I can't wait until we can get together at the conference, and, you know, hopefully it'll be in March. I don't know, but it will be as soon as it's safe to do it. And you guys just reach out to each other. You know,
well, you know, you just have to keep going. I know that sounds like it's not very sturdy advice, but truth of it is that you just have to keep going. And like I said, I had 2 books in a drawer. I mean, you know how long it takes to write a book. Both of those books did not get published. They were put in a drawer. And I just was like, well, if you want to do it, you got to keep writing. And so COVID sucks, man. It sucks. And it's one of the reasons I leave my house to try to write any place. But whatever you need, you should take it and do it. It's fair. Keep going.
So thank you guys all for coming.
Thank you for listening, you guys.
We're going to have other events, other conference events. So stay tuned for news about that. And Jackie and Ann, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I'm putting out a new newsletter on November 30th. So if you sign up for it, I think I'm going to be sending out an article on revision. If not this month, for sure next month. Samantha just edited it for me.
So it's
Revised it.
good.
Yeah, so it's anngarvin.net. If you want to, you can just sign up when you look at, it's my new website too. You should take it. It's pretty.
Okay, thank you guys.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.